worlds are not just colliding, they're collapsing on Donald Trump. You've got the not so secret White House meetings about the Epstein files. Who's the leaker? You've got new lawsuits that have been filed against Donald Trump to try to get the Epstein files. As he struggles domestically, he looks to foreign policy to make him a strong man by claiming that he's going to use military troops in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act to go invade Mexico. Things aren't going worse enough for Donald Trump at home. Now he's got to go try to take over Mexico. We break it all down for you the only way we know how, without blowing smoke or sunshine, on Legal AF, the podcast. And here's a clip.
Welcome to Legal AF. We've got a lot to discuss. Donald Trump has lost not just one time, not twice, not three times, but 4 times on the birthright citizenship issue. This follows the United States Supreme Court's ruling that many people thought was favorable to Donald Trump on the issue of birthright citizenship. Not so. We'll explain what went down. And if you've been watching Legal AF before, we told you that that Supreme Court ruling was not going to impact the district courts still blocking Donald Trump trying to overrule the constitutional right to birthright citizenship. We're going to talk about Texas Democrats fighting back, both in terms of blocking the quorum, also in terms of what's going on in court there, as the MAGA Republicans in Texas say that they're sending their own police forces and the FBI to go after the Texas Democrats, who are both in Illinois and California. We'll talk about also what Democratic states are doing in response, as Donald Trump trying to cover up the Epstein files, his connections with Epstein, what he's doing with Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex trafficker. Donald Trump has spent a lot of time this past week ordering his DOJ to go after people like Senator Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James, and a grand jury is being impaneled to criminally prosecute or go after former President Obama and his administration. There are now criminal cases, these criminal investigations open into Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James. In the AG Letitia James case, Donald Trump claims that he was actually the victim and that the DOJ needs to vindicate his rights as a victim of his own civil rights violations based on her successfully prosecuting him in a civil case. We'll talk about that. We'll give some Epstein updates as well. Michael Popok, good to see you. You and I were supposed to see each other in person, but with the mess that Donald Trump has turned the FAA into, your flights got canceled. So we were not able to do this together in person, but it's still good to do this with you this week.
Oh, absolutely. We're gonna reschedule for September. Yeah, I got stuck in that. And just to touch on that for a minute, not only is the air travel in disarray, but Donald Trump just fired the head of the NTSB, the organization that's supposed to be an independent body to investigate air crashes. We'll talk at another break about that. It just shows you that Donald Trump is just the king of chaos. And all we're watching, I think one of the themes for today's show, or for every show that you and I do, every analysis that you and I do, is that Donald Trump is using what I consider to be, of course, the most corrupt presidency. He's wielding the most corrupt Department of Justice in order to go after his political enemies. He knows that the cases that you and I are going to talk about today, whether it's the Obama, the Adam Schiff, the Letitia James cases, it's not that he thinks he can win those. It's that he wanted the headline, that one of which you put up. He wanted the headline of Adam Schiff criminally investigated for mortgage fraud. Letitia James, DOJ opens up criminal investigation. That they want the headline. And then they hope that's the talking point that will distract people and give MAGA some reinforcement now, because they're pretty beleaguered given the tailspin that the Trump administration is in over the economy and the immigration and issues and Epstein. And they're hoping that these sort of shiny objects, which are well-timed, purposely timed for political purposes, all we're watching is a Department of Justice that is nothing more than the political arm of the Trump campaign, of the Trump administration. It's just, there is the fact that we're going to have to talk about a Wednesday night meeting with the FBI, the Department of Justice, and White House officials, including J.D. Vance and others, to talk about the Epstein files and what to do about it, and talk about firing senior people in the FBI, just shows you that that the Department of Justice is just a sock puppet for Donald Trump. We've always known that, but we would never have been able to report on Legal AF about a Biden administration meeting between Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and the head of the FBI, or a Clinton or an Obama, because those things never happened, because the integrity and independence of the Department of Justice was sacrosanct. Donald Trump accused Joe Biden of having those meetings and influencing the prosecutions, because he can never accept the fact that the reason he was prosecuted, whether it was in New York or in DC or in Florida, or he was fraudulently, or his fraud was investigated and the civil case prosecuted, is because of his own misdeeds and wrongful conduct. Since he can't accept that, he has to blame the prosecutors. And I'll leave it on this. The fact that they just fired two of the most senior FBI agents because they worked on the Jan 6 task force, this begs the question, and it's a rhetorical one. What if Trump had been elected again and not Biden? What would he have done with all of the 2,000 criminals that attacked and tried to burn down our Capitol? He would have instructed his FBI and his Department of Justice to ignore it. The crimes that were obviously being committed, all caught on closed circuit TV, they would have just been ignored. I mean, they were just doing their job. They didn't lead the insurrection, but the fact that he's still rooting out, and as a result, whether it's the hundreds and hundreds of Department of Justice attorneys that in senior positions and otherwise that have left the Department of Justice, hollowing it out, making us less safe, making the rule of law less protected, or the FBI, hostage task force, domestic terrorism task force leadership. We are not safer today because these people are being shown the door and not being replaced because nobody wants to work for this administration. We are, what's the old question the politicians always ask? Are you better off today than you were 6 months ago, 7 months ago? Economically, national security, global security? The answer is a resounding no.
This, as Donald Trump also posted this morning, essentially that he intends to completely take over Washington, D.C. So National Guard, military, Marines, it will, again, look like it already does, authoritarian regime. Trump's posters, like North Korea, right? Like military, Marines everywhere. Nobody's going to go to Washington, D.C. Tourists are not coming into the United States. As Donald Trump says, no one's coming in through the border at all. No one comes in through the border of North Korea. Or earlier, Donald Trump posted, on Monday, a press conference will be held. He says essentially to stop violent crime. But this is one of Donald Trump's schemes that we always see over and over again, right? He claims emergencies for national security usurpation of power. Now I'm the executive. There's an emergency. We're under an invasion. I'm going to exercise the power of an authoritarian. Popok, you mentioned the Department of Justice losing all of, huge portions of its smartest top staff, either because Trump fired them or they've left, they've quit. No one's working there. So you pretty much have the worst of the worst there right now. And to your point, these prosecutors, these people violating their ethical obligations, a lot of them violating the law, and the DOJ just looks like a criminal cartel.
And wait, before you leave that, and we're not going to touch on all this because you and I have to curate an episode. But you've got two Trumpers on the D.C. Appellate Court, D.C. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, or Federal Court, who just ruled that Judge Boasberg had stepped out of line because he had been lied to in his courtroom about the 200 or so people that were kidnapped and sent to concentration camps in El Salvador. And he wanted to get to the bottom of it as a federal judge. And he was wrapped on the knuckles by two Trumpers. Thank God that they don't hold the majority on that particular court. But Katsas and Rayo wrote scathing critiques of Boasberg. We've been waiting for that order. It's been sitting around for a long time. Now we know why. Judge Pillard, an Obama appointee, of course, took the logical view, which is he had every right to find a probable cause for criminal contempt against the Trump administration. But that's what we're watching as Donald Trump, and just as a preview, because you and I will talk about it starting next week, and others on Legal AF, Judge Breyer is holding a 3-day trial. It starts on Monday about whether in your home state, whether Donald Trump violated the Posse Comitatus Act by using the federal troops on domestic soil for law enforcement purposes or to support immigration arrests and removal, which would violate a longstanding firewall that stops the commander-in-chief from turning the tanks and the troops against the American people on American soil. While we have that trial going on, we've got Donald Trump announcing that he's going to violate the Posse Comitatus Act again, and he's going to use the federal troops in foreign countries without their permission to try to take out drug cartels, like in Mexico, Colombia, and they stand there lying to the American people because it's hard to keep track of all this information. And it's not, part of it is they're taking advantage of the fact that the American people don't follow things as closely as our audience does or we do. But he stands there and says, Carolyn Levitt, $50 million bounty on Maduro in Venezuela for the information to kill or capture him. All right. Biden had a $25 million bounty. The president before that had a $15 million bounty. These bounties don't seem to be working. But, it's this get tough thing. They've decided that the only thing they have for political gain, besides effing with the map, so we'll talk about that later, is to portray Donald Trump as a dictator, a strongman dictator, and they think that gets them votes. So that's why we're saying takeover of D.C. We're going to send troops to Mexico. We're going to, this is obviously what the Trump administration and the Trump campaign for the midterms wants to portray him as. Peacemaker, we'll talk more about that later, peacemaker around the world and strong man at home. Welcome back. Ben Meiselas and me, we put that show together 5 years ago. We called it Legal AF then for a reason. And now you know why. We anticipate, we coordinate, we collaborate, and we commentate about all things related to Donald Trump. I had to get a haircut just for this hot take. Join us on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. At 8 p.m., we will bring you the live version of Legal AF. We could also use your help in downloading the audio version, which is over on wherever you get your audio podcasts from Spotify, Google, Apple, and the rest. We're holding steady, number 20 in all podcasts on YouTube, 50 in all news podcasts on Apple, but we need your help. We want to kind of keep that rising up. With your help, we will overcome this administration, I assure you. Until my next hot take or anything Legal AF, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.